Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back, and it has never felt so good to say that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today, we'll be covering the New York City and New York State primary election results. There's a few races outside of New York City that I'll cover. None of them particularly great, but New York had their primary elections today. This is probably a wrap for the primary cycle. The next big thing would probably be the Arizona State or the Arizona Congressional Special Election primary sometime in July. But, this race was contentious the entire time, whether it be Cuomo against Eric Adams or Cuomo against I think for a little bit, Scott Stringer was second in the polls. But towards the end, it really became a race between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Qu'ran. His last name's Mamdani, but that sounds retarded. I like Zohran Quaran more. And I went in thinking that Cuomo was the favorite. Almost every poll showed it. There was one poll, an outlier from Emerson, that showed Mamdani up. But I thought, okay, every other poll shows Cuomo up. But and while we don't have ranked choice voting tabulation yet, this race is over. Zohran Quaran is the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City, in a pretty big upset. And I don't think it's an upset that Mamdani won. It's obviously an upset like a month or two ago. Like, he really turned this race around. You saw in the final days, he walked all the way up and down Manhattan for several hours just canvassing voters. Like, he ran a pretty phenomenal campaign. As much as I hate the guy and recognize that like New York City is going to die because of him, you know, saying, "Oh well, just make the grocery stores government owned," and abolish the police. Not exactly an at all intelligent um strategy, but who knows? Give him a chance. When he burns down the city, I can say, "I told you so." I just would say, Zohan Kwan, as mayor, probably don't want to be in any tall buildings. But the margin which this happened is a pretty big upset. Um, Obviously, we won't know this until July 1st, and we also won't have an official race call until then. New York City is retarded in as much as like they don't tally ranked choice voting until every vote is in, which like at this point, one you could pretty obviously say that it's going the final round is Zohan versus Andrew Cuomo. Two, it's mathematically impossible if every candidate except Brad Lander ranked every voter ranked Brad Lander second. That's still not enough to get him into second. And get Cuomo into third. So realistically, that's how ranked choice voting works. There would be two rounds of ranked choice voting, but no, we can't do that. Not competent city. But at the end of the day, this race is tracking for about a Zohran plus, if I had to throw out a guess, 12 to 15 race. He should win Manhattan by a bit more. Obviously, Brooklyn and Queens he'll do well in. The Bronx should still end up with Cuomo, though it won't be a particularly impressive margin. And Staten Island could continue to be under 10 points, which is pretty insane. Obviously, in 2021, Staten Island was very close. Between the more progressive Catherine Garcia and the more moderate and eventual winner, Eric Adams. But this time around, it was not expected to be close whatsoever. Andrew Cuomo was expected to run away with it. But at some point, like, you could say it's the heat since it was 100 degrees. I'm not even kidding. During the primary election, you can say like, oh, it's Zohran surging at the end, but like this race was completely unwinnable for Andrew Cuomo. Um, he fumbled it hard. He took it for granted that he would be the nominee because he was a governor, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I just think that before this race happened, what you had was general dissatisfaction with Eric Adams. Eric Adams, seen as a more moderate candidate, seen as a more conservative, even Democrat, even an ally of Trump. Like, this primary result is defined by that. You saw Andrew Cuomo. to some extent, um, run a little bit to the left of like where Eric Adams was and even where he was before. Focus especially on how he would combat. But at the end of the day, this primary is going to be really, really hard for a conservative like Andrew Cuomo to win. I'm saying conservative in the Democratic Party, which is, like the most sane communist. Like, it, eh, it's a bit hard to, you know, justify saying he's conservative, but for the primary electorate of New York City, he was more conservative than Zohran. But like, this was a change election. Eric Adams completely mismanaged the city, ran it into the ground, didn't work with the city council whatsoever, and Andrew Cuomo was seen as more of the same. And that was a massive failure of the Andrew Cuomo campaign. Um, he took this race for granted, but like, you should have seen where the wind was blowing when he announced, what is it, 6 months ago? Like, he completely blundered it. And I think had Zohran not surged, it would have been Lander, or it would have been Adams, or it would have been Myrie, or it would have been someone else who would have risen to take him on. Especially with ranked choice voting, you would have eventually seen someone beat him. Because, like, it just, it's such a monumental underperformance. Like, it baffles my mind that polls had this race close. And if it wasn't close, it was in favor of Cuomo. Um, But we also do have to look to the general election. This race will be heading to a general election in November. You have Curtis Lewa, the Republican nominee. Eric Adams will be running as an independent. And from what I've seen, this is obviously subject to change. Cuomo will probably also be running on a third party ballot. Before this primary happened, long before this primary happened, and when it was considered competitive, Andrew Cuomo created the Fight and Deliver ballot line, which New York, it's a weird state. If I want to run for a race, I can run as a Republican. I can get the Conservative Party endorsement. And then what happens is if I run, then Republican plus Conservative for me are tallied up, and that is my vote total. So if Andrew Cuomo were the Democratic nominee, he would get all the people who vote for the Democrat ballot line, which is Andrew Cuomo, plus the people who vote for Fight and Deliver. So there's a chance that he just made it. I don't know, because it makes him look better. He's going to fight and he's going to deliver. But I think more likely it was him actually being smart for once in his entire political career, and making it as a contingency in case he lost. And Andrew Cuomo made sure he's a very slick politician. He made sure to concede the primary to Zohran. He said this is his night, which is a little bit weird. I wouldn't choose that. Talking about how tonight the primary only is his night. If I wasn't planning on running in the general election, we are shaping up for a relatively competitive general election. There's some warning signs for Cuomo. Obviously, one, 57% of the Democratic base is probably going to end up backing Zoran, but you can also attribute that to like it was hot. People didn't turn out as much. A million voters. It sounds like a lot, but for New York City, such a massive Democratic hub, it really isn't that much. And for such a contentious race where dozens of millions were spent amongst all the candidates, like it's not that much. And maybe you could say if all of them turned out, Cuomo would be winning this, or at least it would be closer. Because Cuomo's base, you know, more minority heavy. Actually, I can go to the precinct map here, which obviously isn't fully in, and you have some Lander precincts, obviously showing that we're not having the final round of ranked choice voting. But in the bottom, uh, right over here, you can see Mondani leads by 7. He leads by a bit amongst whites and Hispanics. Asians actually ended up backing him, which a little bit surprising, but it makes some sense seeing as these were the Andrew Yang supporters in 2021. But you saw black voters especially end up turning out for Cuomo. Like Asians, Zohran barely cracked a majority. Hispanics and whites, he didn't get a majority in. Not really close in either one. But blacks, Andrew Cuomo ended up getting a majority there. Of the total black vote. And like he swept almost all these precincts. So the Bronx, one precinct that was majority black, that Zohran ended up winning. Barely any precincts in Queens. Brooklyn, it's Zohran's home borough. A lot of these areas are very close to a state assembly district. Staten Island, these are just outliers. And New York City, it's the Harlem area. It's not exactly the most conservative Democrat place. But like you saw Andrew Cuomo's be black, be lower income, be lower density, and more of the people, the younger people, the people who voted early, um, and the people who were more willing to brave the heat to cast their vote, lean toward Mamdani. Sorry, not Mamdani, towards Qu'ran. Um, you could say to some extent that that is why Cuomo ended up losing this primary. But in a general election, I still do think it's going to be a pretty tough win for Cuomo. Why? Black voters, they'll vote different in the primary, but at the end of the day, black voters have a pretty heavy party loyalty. And I think in the general election, you're going to see this Cuomo plus 18. And I think that I'm not going to say that Cuomo only won black voters by 18. I think he won them by much more. But you could see him win a majority of them in the general election, but he's not going to get quite as high of a margin as he did in this primary because a lot more black voters who voted for him in the primary either going to be pissed off that he's running as a third party, see it as disingenuous and playing spoiler, or are going to vote for the Democratic nominee, whether or not they know that Cuomo is a candidate, whether or not they know that Zohran, um, you know, is the Democratic nominee. Like, at the end of the day, you're not going to get as good of a share in the general election as an independent or third party candidate as you did in the primary. So, what Cuomo has to hope in the general election is one, Sliwa doesn't come through between Zohran, Cuomo, and Adams splitting the vote and win. Because that's probably the worst scenario for the New York Democrats. Not the worst scenario for the city, because, we would actually have a city like Zohran mismanaging it to the ground. But it would still be a pretty terrible result for New York Democrats. So you have to hope that, first and foremost. Second, you have to hope that a lot of conservatives, Republicans, independents, moderates, and people who didn't turn out for this primary end up turning out in the general election for him. That's where he's going to be getting a lot of appeal that he didn't have in this primary. People who didn't turn out for the primary and people who couldn't turn out for the primary because they're Republicans, because they're registered Democrats, but they don't want to vote in the Democratic primary because they identify as more conservative, because they're moderates, because they remember him as governor and have nostalgia for that. That is how Cuomo has a chance in this general election. I do think that it'll be contentious. There's a lot more money to be spent. There's a lot more debates to be had. There's a pretty contentious election potentially in front of us. Cuomo might, look at the internal polls and be like, "I'm fucked. I'm not gonna run in this general election. There's no use in contesting it." But the way he signaled, he probably will run, and he does have a coalition: black voters, lower income voters, lower density voters. Which, by the way, the fact that Zohran, his best group, was higher income voters, deeply ironic. Just find that hilarious. As against the point, but yeah, contentious general election setup, but Zohran is the obvious favorite for that. We'll discuss the implications of that. The fact that Republicans are heavily favored to win the House as of now, or at least they're much more favored than before this primary. Now that Zohran is going to run the city into the ground, like Tom Suozzi might as well retire. Same thing with Laura Gillen. Those seats are, if Zohran, his plan of, we'll just nationalize, we'll just make the government own everything that's bad. We'll remove the police and we'll just freeze everything that's bad. He'll go up to like Rent and say, "Freeze, freeze, stop! Why are you being mean to me? Stop!" Like, he's gonna go up to the city council and be like, "Freeze!" The same thing with Kathy Hochul. Um, yeah, unless he's a secret genius. And the policies we've tried before that have run cities into the ground. Cough, cough. Brandon Johnson. Cough, cough. St. Louis. Cough, cough. Pittsburgh. Maybe they work for once, but they probably won't. And I will be telling everyone I told you so when that happens. But yeah, this is a pretty terrible result for people like Mikey Sherrill, which New York City media market is expensive because ads are run across the New York City media market rather than just in New York City, in New Jersey. So if Andrew Cuomo runs a general election campaign and spends attacking Zohran Mandami, progressive politics, that certainly is going to help out the Democrat who's trying to appeal as a moderate while not losing the left wing flank. It's going to be great for her. With Jack Citarelli probably baseline going to do better than his 2021 result. Great result for her. But this could be a great result for Republicans, depending on how it goes. I don't think we'll analyze that as of now, because we don't even know who will be mayor. We don't know the final results for ranked choice voting. We have no idea how this campaign will shake out. Like, who knows? In the general election, Andrew Cuomo might be pulling ahead, and then it turns out he raped another woman. Since you can't say like he raped a woman, because he's already done that several times. Who knows? Then that could change it. We don't know. We don't know as of now. But you also had public advocate Jumaane Williams won this by quite a bit. Jumaane Williams really hasn't faced a competitive election besides for his run for lieutenant governor in 2018. His run for governor in 2022 didn't go too well, and the 2019 special election, which that's an interesting race. The 2019 New York City public advocate special election. On February. That's an interesting look at how Republicans could have potentially won a citywide election. I want to explain that here. New York City Comptroller Mark Levine, the Manhattan Borough President, um, obvious favorite as of now. He's at 48%. Um, this is how ranked choice voting goes. It's very nice to be the leader, even if all of these candidates are bitterly progressive. Which Justin Brand is the progressive, hence why he did good in Brooklyn. I wonder where he got that from. Um, and hence why he also performed the polls massively, like Mamdani. But even if they're all progressives, you're gonna have ballots expended. Levine is the heavy favorite. Like he has a 99% chance of winning here. Win for moderate Democrats. Even though this was a pretty massive loss because Raj Kumar was actually kind of well funded. And I think like spending was about tied between the two, and obviously the mayoral result. But it's something. It's kind of a shift to the right or a shift to the center from Brad Lander. And the Republican primary kind of doesn't matter, but it's kind of funny that we have margins for these guys. Like, why do you even spend the time on margins here? Like, there's no votes here, and it's also funny. 890,000 votes 28. I love New York City politics. And then the city council, I mean, there's not too much that matters. One Republican race, probably. There's still a lot of votes, or a few votes left to be counted. But 32 separate the two candidates. Probably goes to ranked choice voting. Who knows? But otherwise, all the other contested Republican primaries, city council 48. Um, I actually think the only other one was Frank Morano's seat. All of those won't be contested, which is an okay sign for the general election for Republicans. The kind of competitive seats, the big one, City Council District 13, that's a shit show of a primary for Democrats. That's probably one of the only places where they're on the offensive because, if I'm not mistaken, two districts narrow Trump seats with Democratic incumbents in the city council. So potentially Republicans could make gains here. Also, I kind of have to mention it, but Anthony Weiner will not be making a comeback. It's kind of obvious, but it will be replaced by Epstein, which is kind of funnier. And then we also had some other results. Buffalo, the incumbent kind of moderate mayor, was primaried out by a progressive state senator. Like most New York City races, this is not the final verdict. You still have a general election. Sean Ryan will obviously be the Democratic nominee, but Scanlon, also using the exact same system Cuomo has used, has decided to run as an independent in the general election. And if you'll remember, Buffalo mayor in 2021 was a pretty big upset. Um, the incumbent kind of moderate, I should stop saying conservative, moderate mayor was primaried out by progressive and then ended up running a successful write-in campaign and winning that way. You could see a similar thing here, except through a different avenue of running on a third party rather than a write-in. In case you're wondering, that mayor who won through a write-in campaign resigned last year. I think, to enter the private sector, which is why Scanlon ended up taking his place. They did special elections here. I really don't care about the primaries. I don't feel like going through them. Though it's kind of funny how you had a former congressman. I think that's a U.S. congressman, though I'm not sure. Siblings squaring off against each other. It's kind of funny, but I really don't care here. Both of these should go Democrat in the general election. The Republicans have contested them, and for those who are wanting to keep track of these special elections, Republicans slightly overperformed in both of them. And then here, it looks bad. Democrats are leading, but you also do have to realize that a Republican is getting 10% of the vote. Schultz probably won't hit 50%. Here, this will advance to an August 26th, quote unquote, runoff. It's a state assembly district, and it's about even with Trump's performance. So that kind of doesn't matter. Um, but yeah, big night, probably the last big primary election night for a while. My apologies that I wasn't able to cover the Virginia primaries and the New Jersey primaries, or even stream this primary, though I did like Maryland prediction streams. Goes up to him, by the way. Great guy. For obvious reasons, I wasn't streaming those, but to some extent, I'm back. Don't expect me to frequently upload, and sorry, the June predictions will be lost to history. Um, kind of weird that I think that's the first time since I created this channel that I didn't do predictions for a month. But I mean, at some point, it's June 2025. I don't think anyone gives a shit. Um, but yeah, I don't think I'm going to post too much. And I think if I do post, it'll be exploring different versions of content. Uh, yeah, it's been nice following these primaries, but it's kind of the end of a complex primary cycle in a very active June. Not even joking when I say the next most interesting thing in the politics sphere is probably Squid Game releasing at the end of the week. Um, yeah, but anyways, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're new or if you're old. And you unsubscribed, make sure to subscribe again. I'm not a betting man, but you don't bet against testers done. Um, and we are so back. We are so back. Not in a full sense. And I still do have some reservations about doing streams. If I do, don't worry, it'll be with Token Canadian, because I know he pisses off all the right people. But yeah, don't worry, I'm not dead yet. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Testers done. Out.